Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I've said on this platform that Zimbabwe is a failed state. We are a failed state. There's no denying that. And one can look at how did we come to be a failed state? And one of this explanation is that we have had the misfortune of having leaders who honestly believed that they are not accountable to the electorate. Zanu PF felt that they could not subject themselves to being voted out of office by the ordinary Zimbabweans. And so from the word go in 1980, when the country gained its independence, the party made it abundantly clear in the 1980 elections that if Zanu PF does not win those elections, the Bush War would continue. The message was very clear. All the talk about one man, one vote before independence were forgotten. When push comes to shove, Zanu PF will see to it that they rule, with or without the people's blessing. Many people, of course, voted to end the Bush War. And when Mugabe and company got their feet under the desk, the number one priority was to consolidate their power. Within 3 years, the nation found itself being subjected to a brutal acts of violence in the form of Kukurawundi. The primary purpose of Kukurawundi was to force the only other political party that really constituted a serious challenge to Zanu PF's rule, i.e. PF SAPU, led by the late Dr. Joshua Nkomo, to give up its claim as an independent political party. That was the primary purpose of Kukurawundi. And by 1987, PF SAPU leaders relented. They signed the Unity Accord, which paved the way for Zanu PF to impose the de facto one-party state that has ruled the country to this day. That is the reality. Zanu PF has rigged elections to make sure that Zanu PF rules. And when you rig elections, what you're saying is you don't want the people to hold you to democratic account. So we have got to restate this fact that all those in public office must be democratically accountable to the people. Even if those people are powerful, the masses, who have no clue what is going on, there should be no exception to that. And that should not be negotiable either. Holding Zanu PF to account has proven to be a serious challenge. There's no denying that. And by the late 1990s, people realized that Zanu PF had created a political system in which they exercised carte blanche dictatorial powers to ride roughshod over the people, denying them their fundamental rights and freedoms, including the right to a meaningful say in the governance of the country. The people decided that they were going to elect opposition leaders who will implement the democratic reforms necessary to dismantle the Zanu PF dictatorship. The alternative was to take up arms and fight the Zanu PF regime, have another armed struggle. That, I believe, was not necessary. And history has shown that, yes, the opposition leaders they elected, they did have the opportunity to implement the necessary democratic reforms. The only problem is, of course, they failed to do so in 25 years, including the 5 years in the GNU, for no other reason than that they sold out. And here comes the crunch. The nation has been trying to hold the MDC-CCC leaders to account, to democratic account, without much success. This is a recent posting by Nelson Chamisa, in which he is claiming the duty to lead. He wrote, "When the people choose you as their leader, the voice of the haters and the naysayers no longer matter." This has been disappointing because ever since the 2023 elections, many people have been asking Chamisa to account for what happened in 2023. He lied to the people that he had plugged all the vote rigging loopholes. He knew that was a lie, but he said it anyway, to con people to participate in flawed elections. The consequences of that is that that gave Zanu PF legitimacy. How anyone can refuse to account for such a serious mistake? It's not a mistake, because this wasn't the first time he has done it. He lied again in 2018. And we know that he knew, he and his fellow MDC-CCC leaders knew that participating in these flawed elections will only give Zanu PF legitimacy. I've quoted David Coltart's book, in which Coltart admitted that very point, that they were participating in flawed elections, which they knew were flawed, which they knew that by participating, they're only giving Zanu PF legitimacy. So we cannot pretend that they didn't know. They knew. We cannot pretend that Chamisa didn't lie, because we have got evidence of him saying it himself, that he was going to win the 2023 elections. He even evokes the name of God.
Makorokoto Zimbabwe nokuti hakuna munhu anomira kana denga raronga plan. Denga raronga plan, denga harifoiri. Plan yaMwari haifoiri. Ini ndatanga kugadzira cabinet. There is no way we are not going to form a new cabinet. There is no way we are not going to have a celebration. There is no way we are not going to have an inauguration. Let's start preparing for our inauguration. Let's start preparing for our celebration.
What happened to the celebration? Why didn't it happen? He knew that Zanu PF was blatantly rigging those elections. He knew that MDC leaders had the golden opportunity to implement the democratic reforms during the GNU. They failed to implement even one reform. And as for the 2023 elections, he didn't even bother to deploy election agents at all the polling stations, even though he had the funding for it. Here is one of his MPs, Chilton Wende, admitting that there were election agencies who were not paid, and the money was used to buy farms and cars. It is important to understand that democracy works if those in positions of power and authority are accountable to the people. The fact that Chamisa is taking advantage of the fact that the millions of ordinary Zimbabweans out there have no clue what is happening. They have no clue that MDC leaders sold out during the GNU. They were told by Chamisa that he had plugged the vote rigging loopholes. They believed it without understanding what that really meant. If Chamisa said he has blocked the loopholes, Zanu PF will not rig, they believed it. And some of them are so simple-minded that they don't even have the common sense to ask now, after the fact, that you told us that you had blocked, you plugged the vote rigging loopholes. What happened? They have no clue. Be that as it may, we want all political leaders to be accountable. And I find it an outrage that every time anyone tries to say to Chamisa and company, account for A, B, C, D, he has got the arrogance of dismissing those people as haters. That is totally unacceptable. That. Particularly in our case here, because if Chamisa is allowed to get away with lying to people and conning them to participate in flawed elections, I can tell you now, he is gearing to lie to people again come 2028 elections and con them to participate in those flawed elections only to give Zanu PF legitimacy and perpetuate the people's suffering. I have to say, one of the most disappointing things here also is the sheer cold indifference of both Zanu PF politicians and the opposition politicians to the suffering of the ordinary people. One of the problems we have why we are a failed state, is that we have failed to govern ourselves. I think the sheer cold indifference of the political leaders to the suffering of the masses epitomize our failure to govern ourselves. Think about it.